Hi there, my name is Nick Ballou. I am a PhD student at Queen Mary University of London, and on behalf of myself and my co-authors, I want to tell you a little bit about our project on transparency and openness guidelines in HCI journals. In the last decade in particular, there's been a growing awareness that the ways that we create and then ultimately disseminate scientific knowledge are flawed in some ways and can lead to a less trustworthy evidence base than we would like. A lot of this has fallen under the open science label, but both by people who identify with that label and those that do not, there have been a lot of initiatives to reform scientific practice and make the literature more trustworthy. A lot of these have focused on the bottom three levels here, though, and today I want to talk about the top two and the role that publishers play in trustworthy scientific knowledge generation. One particularly influential attempt to reform scientific publishing practices has come from the Transparency and Openness Promotion guidelines, the TOP guidelines, and these are a set of 10 modular standards that primarily address the hypothetico-deductive model of largely quantitative knowledge generation. And these have two goals, namely to increase the trustworthiness of the literature by reducing things like questionable research practices, and to facilitate cumulative knowledge growth by allowing people to build on others' work as easily as possible. And this aligns pretty closely with my own philosophy of science, so it contains things that I think are really important, like whether a journal encourages replication studies, whether data is required to be shared, or whether null findings are systematically disadvantaged or not. I won't talk about all of these at length, so feel free to either pause the video or check the link up here for more information, but essentially how a journal handles these 10 aspects of transparency and openness can be scored using the top guidelines from 0 to 3, where in most cases 0 means that the journal has no policy for that particular aspect, a 1 means that there's some kind of description or encouragement, 2 is where it is required, and 3 is where it is required and verified, or computationally reproduced, for example, before publication. So we wanted to know more about the journals that the HCI community uses most frequently, and whether they are currently aligning with or implementing these transparency policies. And we focused on journal publications instead of conference proceedings because those were the original targets of the top guidelines. So what we did is we used the Scopus API to take the publication history of all the recent CHI-FIRST authors from the last 5 years, approximately since the top guidelines were implemented. And we get a list of 3.3 thousand authors, and we take their entire publication history and looked for the journals that were most common in that set. We took the top 51 of those because there was a tie at 50. This was accounting for about 40% of all the publications of this group total. And then we coded them with 2 coders and 3 rounds. For some standards, we had excellent inter-rater reliability. For some of them, it was quite poor, but that in itself was an interesting finding, and we're going to return to that in a second. At the end of it, what we found is this. Across the board, very few of the journals in our sample set or specify clear policies with regard to these 10 aspects of transparency and openness. The modal score was a 0. The mean was 2.5 out of 29 total. We see the highest rates for data citation, so about half of journals specify a particular form, reference format for how you can cite data so that people can get credit for sharing data. But for some of the other ones, like analysis pre-registration or specifying an analysis plan in advance, only 2 of the 51 journals had policies for that. The highest performers generally were the domain general journals. So we get journals like PLOS ONE, Frontiers in Psychology, Scientific Reports also scored highly, and then some of the journals from particular publishers like MDPI scoring most highly, whereas journals from other publishers like IEEE and the ACM scored universally poorly with 1s or 0s. This, of course, is not a particularly impressive state of affairs, so we have here 4 things that we think people can do to help improve the situation going forward. The first is to leverage HCI expertise to make the transparency easy. What we found is that these policies are an absolute mess, sometimes spread across multiple pages, hidden behind broken links, or even being self-contradicting. If top guidelines align with your own personal scientific values, then we also encourage you to reward transparent publishers. You can use top scores available in our supplemental materials for the journals that we reviewed or elsewhere as factors when considering where to submit your papers and where to review for. If, of course, you're on an editorial board, then we strongly encourage you to use TOP as a starting point for implementing clear policies at your own journal. The TOP guidelines have all kinds of templates that you can take and modify to suit your particular discipline. And then finally, we really want to emphasize that we need to continue to reflect on whether these particular set of transparency standards are suitable for HCI or for conferences. These shouldn't be implemented unthinkingly, and we don't expect that every publication outlet should get a maximum score on this. Instead, it's a starting point for thinking about what aspects of transparency and openness are applicable for HCI, and how can we implement those most clearly and easiest for our authors. Thank you so much for listening. That's it from me, and please, please, please get in touch if you have any questions or ideas for the future.